The theme which I have chosen to talk about is childhood challenges, and I will be analyzing and interpreting the short story The Flowers, which is written in 1973 by Alice Walker. The theme mostly circles around the development from innocence to experience, which is a development that all human beings will experience when growing up from childhood to adulthood. Because when you are born, you are innocent because of your lack of knowledge, and as a little child, you don't really know much about what is outside your own little world. But then as you grow older, you will begin to gain some curiosity, which will at some point lead you to explore the world outside your own little garden. And then at some point, you will probably discover something that will open your eyes and make you realize that life is not as sweet and pleasant as you might have thought, but it is way more complex and contains a lot of contrasts as, for example, good and bad people and life and death. And it is important to add that when you have first moved out of your own little comfort zone and have seen the real world, or maybe experienced some kind of problem or something awful, you can't just go back or follow the same straight path that you used to do, because life will force you to make some decisions which will have some consequences for your future, and your view on life will change as you get older. The Flowers by Alice Walker is set at the time of the sharecroppers and thematizes a young girl's loss of innocence when she is out picking flowers in the woods near her house and discovers the remains of a dead man who has probably been lynched and hanged, which changes her view on life forever. When characterizing Maya, there is no doubt that she, in the beginning of the story at least, is a very innocent girl, which for example can be seen in the two quotes that I have picked out, and the first one from page 107, line 1 to 5, and says, "It seemed to Maya that the days had never been as beautiful as these. The harvesting of the corn and cotton, peanuts and squash made each day a golden surprise." And the second quote is from page 107 as well, line 8 to 10. "She was 10, and nothing existed for her but her song, the stick clutched in her hand, and the ta-ta-ta-ta-ta of accompaniment. The fact that she is skipping, humming, and picking wild flowers supports the fact about her being a happy little girl without any worries. But later on, when she goes deeper into the woods, the atmosphere changes from being very cheerful and peaceful to becoming a bit exciting and gloomy. The name Mayab can also be seen as a symbol of her innocent character, because Mayab is a shortening of myopia, which means nearsightedness, and it refers to the fact that she's only a child. She can only see what is right in front of her, and she only knows about what is going on in her own little childish world, but she really doesn't know anything about what's happening in the real world or in society. And another thing that indicates Mayer's development from innocence to experience is the development in the narration through the story. So in the beginning, or actually in most of the story, until Maya discovers that the man has been lynched and hanged, the story makes use of a third-person omniscient narrator, which for example can be seen in the quote from the beginning of the text from page 107, line 8, which says, "She felt light and good in the warm sun," but at the end the narrator becomes more like a third-person objective narrator, and we no longer have access to her thoughts and feelings, but the reader has to figure out how she feels by looking at the symbolism. And this is for example seen at page 108, line 9 to 10, where it says that Maya laid down her flowers and the summer was over. So the summer being over actually means that Maya gives up her innocence and her view on life has now changed because she has now seen what is hidden underneath all the perfect and pretty flowers that she used to admire, and she has seen some of the real problems in society and the dark side of the world with death and racial problems. As I said in the beginning of my video in the introduction to the theme, the development from innocence to experience is very characteristic for the theme of childhood challenges, and this is, just to sum up, seen very clearly in the flowers where Maya gives up her innocence at the end of the story. The reason behind her development can be explained by both her internal and external conflict, and the external conflict is when she finds the dead man, and this is where the internal conflict arises, which basically is a clash between how she thought the world was and how it actually is. And as I mentioned earlier, you can't just go back when you have first experienced some of the real world, because life will mark your soul in some way and you can't just erase your experience. And this is why Maya lays down her flowers and gives up her innocence at the end of the story. So the thing about the child experiencing something unexpected with the stages of something horrible, which creates the internal conflict, is very characteristic for the theme, because the child experiences a gap between how the child thought the world was and how it really is. This is, for example, seen in the short story Indian Camp by Ernest Hemingway from 1924, where the main character, Nick, witnesses his father, who is a doctor, saving 2 lives, and then he also experiences suicide. So the confrontation with life and death at almost the same time makes Nick develop from innocence to experience at the end of the story, and this development is shown through some contrast in the story. And for example, there is a mist on the way to the camp, which makes it hard for Nick to see. And when they are on the way back, after Nick has experienced the birth and the suicide, the mist is gone and he is now able to see clearly. And this is just like in the flowers, where Maya, whose name refers to myopia, it isn't able to look outside of her own life because of her childish mind, and then she suddenly experiences something unexpected, and she lays down her flowers and gives up her innocence. And with the 2 children, you can say that because they have experienced death, which they didn't thought existed, they are now able to see the harsh realities of life. So just to sum up, what the 2 stories have in common is that they both of the main characters, the 2 children, have some kind of curiosity which leads them to explore something unexpected, that forms the external crisis, and the internal crisis begins because the child experiences this gap between how the world actually is and their previous imaginations of the world.